Good morning, boys and girls. Today we will be looking at lesson 29. We are really starting to get into some math that I kind of call crazy fun. I enjoy all of the things we get to do with fractions, both now and in the future. Today we begin with multiplying fractions, and also we take a quick look at how we can quickly and simply reduce fractions by dividing by common factors. So let's begin with multiplying fractions. You were actually doing this yesterday as you were working with your fraction pieces, and today we will learn how to do it using our numbers written out in equation form. Previously we have done problems such as this. What is half of 1/2 of a circle? And using our fraction pieces, we see that 1/2 of 1/2 is 1/4. When we find 1/2 of 1/2, we are actually multiplying. The word of means to multiply. So the problem actually becomes 1/2 times 1/2 equals 1/4. This is really important. Remember that in math, when we see the word of, we typically mean we need to multiply. When we multiply fractions, we multiply the numerator to find the numerator of the product, and we multiply the denominators to find the denominator of the product. And then we go on to reduce and simplify if necessary. So, in example 1, we are asked, what is 1/3? Remember that the word of means to multiply. So, I'm going to begin by writing out our problem. 1/2 of 3/5 means that we are going to multiply 1/2 times 3/5. In order to multiply fractions, we multiply the numerators. 1 times 3 is 3, and we multiply the denominators. 2 times 5 is 10. In other words, 1/2 of 3/5 is 3/10. In this case, this fraction answer, our product, is in its simplest form, and so we would simply say that the answer is, or the product is, 3/10. Take a quick step with me to think about your fraction pieces. If we set out 3 1/5 pieces and then asked what is 1/2 of it, and we laid out our pieces, we would in fact find out that we had to set out 3 1/10 pieces in order to exactly and completely fill 3/5. I really enjoy this. Let's go on and look at some more examples together. Example 2 asks us to multiply 3/4 times 2/3. So I will begin by writing out the problem. Then I will multiply my numerators. 3 times 2 is 6. 4 times 3, I multiply my denominators now. Now before I can walk away from this problem and see it is finished, say that it is finished, I need to recognize that 6/12 can be reduced to a simpler terms, that being 1/2. Therefore, we say that the product of 3/4 and 2/3 is 1/2. Let's look at example 3 together. In example 3, we're asked to multiply 4 times 2/3. In this case, we have a whole number and a fraction. The process for multiplying the fractions is still the same. It might be helpful for you to rewrite this problem, turning 4 into its fraction form. Remember that we can write any whole number in fraction form by simply making the whole number the numerator and making the denominator 1. This is the fractional way of writing 4. Then I multiply it all by 2/3. Now I multiply my numerators. 4 times 2 is 8. I multiply my denominators. 1 times 3 is 3. My problem is not yet finished and in its final form because I can see that 8/3 is an improper fraction. So I need to ask myself, how many groups of 3/3, that's a whole, can I take out of 8/3? Well, I can take 2 groups out, and I would have, that would be 6/3, and then I have 2/3 left over. This answer is now in its simplest form, and my problem is finished, just as we have done in the book. Let's look at another example together. You will see these show up in your homework. The problem says that 3 pennies are laid in a row. The diameter of 1 penny is 3/4 of an inch. So how long is this row of pennies? Well, what we have here is 3 groups of 3/4. We have an equal groups problem. It is simply a multiplication problem involving fractions. So in order to solve, I'm going to write 3 in its fractional form. That would be 3/1. Multiply it by 3/4. Then I multiply numerators to get 9. I multiply denominators and come up with 4. And now I need to simplify and reduce. I can get 2 groups of 4/4 out of this fraction. That means I can get 2 wholes out, and I have 1/4 left over. In other words, the length of this row of pennies is 2 1/4 inches. Let's turn our page and double check our work. And we've done it exactly right. Moving on to our next little mini lesson, we are going to take a quick look at how it is we might quickly and simply reduce fractions by looking for common factors between the numerator and the denominator. In the case of 6/12, a factor that is in common between both 6 and 12 is 6. Therefore, I can divide the numerator by 6 and the denominator by 6 without changing the value of the fraction. 6 divided by 6 is 1. 12 divided by 6 is 2. And 6/12 in its reduced state is 1/2. Notice, because I divided the numerator and the denominator by the same number, I have not changed the value of this fraction. 6/12 is truly equivalent to 1/2. I've simply written 6/12 in its simplest terms, 1/2. Now, even better yet, when we're reducing fractions by common factors, is that we would look at both our numerator and denominator and figure out what the greatest common factor is. If we know the greatest common factor, then when we divide by that number, we will automatically arrive at our reduced fraction in its simplest form. It can save us steps if we first study and examine and find the greatest common factor between the numerator and the denominator. For example, if we had taken 6/12 and divided by 2/2, which we could do because 2 is a common factor in both the numerator and the denominator, we would have arrived at an answer of 3/6, which we would have needed to divide again in order to come up with the equivalent fraction in its simplest terms. There's nothing wrong with that method. When we are first learning to reduce fractions, oftentimes students have to reduce a single fraction 2 and sometimes 3 times. Just remember, we can save steps if we first figure out the greatest common factor. Let's look at the example of 8/12. I could immediately see that both the numerator and the denominator share the factor of 2 and start dividing. If I did that method, I would probably find that I had to divide again. Or I could begin by quickly determining the greatest common factor of both 8 and 12. Once you do this more and more often, you begin to just know and memorize some of these greatest common factors. Anyway, the factors of 8 are 1 and 8, 2 and 4. The factors of 12 are 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. Now, comparing these two sets of factors, I see that 4 is the greatest common factor. Therefore, I will divide by 4/4. Remember, 4/4 is just a number that is equal to 1. Therefore, as I divide by 1, I'm not changing the value of my fraction. I'm simply writing it in lower terms. So 8 divided by 4 is 2, and 12 divided by 4 is 3. Therefore, 8/12 in its lowest terms, in its reduced state, is in fact 2/3. Let's turn our page and see how my work compares with the book. It looks pretty good. I'm going to have you go ahead and do all of your lesson practice. Please write out and show your steps in solving each of the problems.